Okay. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fiona Shook, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director of the University of Michigan Detroit Center. I would like to thank you all for taking your time out of your busy lives to join us this evening for our Eye on Detroit Voting by the Dollar. Tonight's discussion is an exploration of campaign finance, especially in terms of understanding the ramifications of the Citizens United ruling. It's 10 years since that ruling has been made by the United States Supreme Court. And tonight we're going to kind of explain different concepts related to campaign finance and what it means to our elections. We've been going with a theme with our Eye on Detroit this year of the concept of misunderstanding, exploring notions and ideas that people tend to think they know about but don't really know about, or have a lot of depth in their knowledge. And so this is our opportunity today, and we felt very appropriate in terms of an election year and what's going on, and all the different discussions and things going on. So we have the opportunity to discuss campaign finance. And we have a nice panel put together today. We have the pleasure of, oh goodness, I don't have your bio.
It's all right,
Jenna Bednar is a professor at the University of Michigan in the Political Science Department, and very excited to have her take part. And she's going to lead the discussion with our panelists, and she's going to introduce the concept, or talk a little bit about Citizens United, and then introduce our panelists. And sometime point throughout the evening, we'll give you all opportunities to ask questions and be part of the discussion. And again, thank you all for coming out, and Professor Bednar.
All right, thank you, Fiona. First, I should ask, if I speak like this, can you hear me?
Yes.
That's always a bad question, because the person who can't hear can't know to say no. Does this improve anything?
You may have to cut it off.
You might have to cut it off.
Yeah. Just turn it up.
I don't know, the light went on, so, oh wait. All right.
That's pretty loud, okay. So thank you, Fiona, so much for having me here. I am delighted to be here. My husband is with me, Scott Page. We were both faculty at Michigan. We were both undergrads at Michigan. We believe Maize and Blue, and we're thrilled to be here in Detroit talking about something that is so truly important. I sort of wish that, I'm delighted that you're here, but I really wish there were like thousands more, because this is, when Fiona said to me, when we were talking about this, he said, I want to talk about some stuff that people think they understand, but then when you get into it, maybe you don't. And money and money's influence in our elections is such an important thing to understand. And with this critically important election year coming at us, I think it's really important that we all come to understand money and money's influence a lot better. So what I thought I would do, we have an amazing panel, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. What I thought I'd do, though, is, because I'm a professor, I do this, just kind of lay out some baseline information, just in case, for anyone out there who, isn't quite clear on just what is a super PAC, or what was Citizens United anyway. So I'm going to take a few minutes to do that, and then I'll introduce our panelists. And then I'm going to ask the panelists if they want to comment, and then we'll get into a conversation amongst us, and then we're going to open it up for questions. All right? Cool. Great. So with campaign finance, why is this so important, and this idea of money in elections? And the reason why, I haven't ever met somebody who says, money in elections, awesome, unless you're employed, I guess, to raise money or something like that. But everybody's suspicious of it. And the reason why we're suspicious of it is because we feel like this is a democracy. Our own voices are what should matter and what should shape who represents us and the choices that they make. They should be responsible to us. And so, and we are all equal in that. One person, one vote. And then you start bringing in money, and you say, maybe people who have more money than I have are going to have more influence than I have, and that doesn't seem fair, right? So that's why we're frustrated with the idea of money in politics. So let's think about this a little bit, because when I talk with my students, I say, if there is something we don't like about our system, and we organize, we can change it. But we need to understand it. And we need to understand the effects of our change. So let's think a little bit more carefully about what is it that money is doing, right? Like, does it buy influence? Does it buy access? Does it change who gets elected? Does it change what they do when they're in office? So those are the kinds of things we want to be thinking about tonight. Before we get into all the ways that money can make things go bad, I want to push back a little bit and think that there might be some ways that money could be useful, right? So, for example, another phrase that we talk about sometimes is incumbency advantage. That is, the person who's in office has the advantage in getting reelected just because people recognize that name, right? But say this person is not working for you, is not doing anything good for you. And so there's a challenger who would like to be elected, but that challenger, in order to get elected, needs to get their name out there, right? And in a little bit, I hope that Commissioner Burton will share some of his experience of getting his name out there. It's very hard, right? So to get your name out there, it's a lot easier if you have some money. So it's useful in that sense. Money can be useful. We can also think about money or a campaign contribution as a form of expression when you can't vote. And what am I talking about here? I'm talking about, let's suppose you live in one place, but you work in a different district. Okay? And your job in this other district is at a company who's going to be very influenced by a particular policy. And let's say there's one candidate who supports the policy that would be really good for your company, and another candidate who would be terrible, doesn't support the policy that would be good for your company. And so you may lose your job because your company might go out of business or have to shrink. You can't vote there because you don't live there. So money might be a way for you to express some kind of preference and send a message about the kind of person you would like to see elected there. It's a different way of thinking about participation, one that I think that we ought to consider. But the point is that we want accountability, right? If that is going to happen, we want to have a sense of who is making a contribution, because we want to understand why, right? So part of what I'm going to talk about right now are what we call disclosure laws. Like if you make a campaign contribution, do people know that it was you who made the contribution? So somebody in this room might make a contribution to somebody's campaign, that person has to file with the Federal Elections Commission saying who it was who made the contribution, how much it was, their address, and their employer. And then these become part of the public record. You could go on the internet tonight and look up who contributed to people's campaigns, how much, and it's interesting. It's actually very interesting data to see, people from which industries are supporting which candidates. It can give you a little sense of maybe the kinds of influence there might be. The reason why we're frustrated with Citizens United, this is a 10-year anniversary, and I'm going to share with you some of the impact of it. But the reason why it's frustrating to a lot of people is that disclosure has gone away in a certain sense. That is, so let me walk through the different forms of contributions and talk about a couple of categories where now it's no longer as clear who's donating what in support of somebody's campaign, or actually parallel activities trying to get somebody elected. So I already talked about the individual donations. Who are these individuals? They are billionaires, and they are people like you and me. Typical donations are very small, but of course there are billionaires who are able to make campaign contributions all the way up to the campaign limit, which is currently $2,800 at the federal level, $2,800 per election. So in an electoral cycle, that would be $5,600. It's tightly regulated, high levels of disclosure. Okay? There's also PACs, the political action committees. These are organizations who make campaign donations directly to campaigns. So for example, like the National Association of Realtors or the National Beer Wholesalers, they will form a PAC. And this too is very tightly regulated, fairly small numbers in terms of limits to the donations that are allowed. Then we have these two other categories. Anyone heard of a super PAC? We talk about super PACs. So super PACs, these next two that I'm describing are barred by law from working with a campaign. But what they can do is make expenditures, like run commercials, in parallel, right? So they're not calling up a campaign officer, some candidate's campaign officer saying, hey, we're thinking about running this ad, what do you think about that? So they can't have those kinds of conversations, but they can still run ads in support or against candidates or in support or against issue areas that point people toward those candidates. So, but they can make, whereas before with the individuals and the PACs, those relatively low dollar amounts, super PAC expenditures are unlimited. And they do, at the same time, they have relatively strong disclosure laws. So you can find out who made donations that's been bundled together by the super PAC. And we're going to call on Eric to describe this in more detail because he has experience there. But so these are groups like Club for Growth, Act Now on Climate. They're organized for political purposes. And then we have political nonprofits. So you might have heard this, it sounds like well, it is a tax filing, 501c groups, okay? When we talk about dark money, these are the groups that we're talking about. And we're talking about these groups because they are not required to disclose who donates to those groups. So these groups are supposed to be organized for other purposes and are, right? So like Sierra Club is a 501c3 group. Or 501c4, I think. Chamber of Commerce, and the NRA, Planned Parenthood, a lot of groups that you know. Their primary purpose is supposed to be something other than political. But the way that's been interpreted is up to 49.9% of their expenditures can be political, and they can still retain this status. Now, what does that mean? So people who want to contribute much more than a couple $1,000s can do so through these groups, and we don't know who's doing it, who's making those contributions. This became possible under Citizens United. So what has changed in the last 10 years, post-Citizens United? The 10 wealthiest contributors of the millions of people who have contributed to political campaigns, you take it down just to 10, the 10 wealthiest contributors and their families account for nearly 8% of total campaign expenditures. Super PACs have boomed. So in 2010, when Citizens United was decided, there were 83 registered super PACs, and they spent $62 million. By 2012, just 2 years later, there are 1,275 super PACs, spending $609 million. In 2016, there was 2,395 super PACs spending $1.6 billion. Okay. So research from the Center for Responsive Politics shows that the power has really shifted from political parties to these outside groups because of the power that the outside groups have in their spending. So their influence has gone from the political parties and their organizational structure to these outside groups. Outside groups outspent candidates in 126 races in the last decade, and that had happened only 15 times prior to Citizens United. So, and election-related spending from non-party independent groups went to $4.5 billion over that decade, and it was just $750 million for the 2 decades prior to Citizens United. So we have this ballooning in spending by the super PACs and by these these 501Cs, these possible dark money organizations. And technically, we've talked a lot in the last couple of years about the influence of foreigners and foreign money in our elections. It remains illegal, but they can funnel money through these 501Cs because they don't have to disclose their donors. So that is a possible channel for foreign influence. So with that in mind, just wanted to get us on the same page about a couple of things. I'm going to introduce this wonderful set of gentlemen who are here to talk with us about their experiences. So I'll start with Sam Riddle, who is sitting to my right. Sam Riddle, who is the host of Riddle at Random on Detroit 9:10 a.m. Superstation. He's an honorably discharged Vietnam-era vet who required a JED after dropping out of high school to enlist. He got his BA from Michigan State, their James Madison College, and his JD from the University of Michigan. He has over 45 years experience in management, political, and media consulting with an emphasis on crisis management. He currently serves as a senior fellow with the internationally acclaimed anti-poverty think tank Pulse Institute. He's a political director for the Michigan chapter of the National Action Network, where he has confronted corporate welfare, systemic racism, and advocated for single mothers. He was a columnist for the Michigan Citizen Detroit Raw. Riddle was founder of the Flint Voice newspaper with filmmaker Michael Moore, whom Riddle worked with on the Academy Award-winning film Bowling for Columbine. Sam still serves as a spokesman for the family of Isaiah Scholes, the only black student slain during the Columbine High school massacre in 1999. Sam and the Scholes family met with President Bill Clinton and the First Lady Hillary Clinton to discuss combating school violence in the aftermath of Columbine. Riddle appears as a political commentator addressing national politics, poverty, and the Flint water crisis issues for WVON Talk of Chicago and other mainstream TV and radio stations.
And it doesn't tell you about the 30 months I spent in federal prison as a direct result of working in Detroit politics, but we're accountable for our own actions. And I am proud of the fact that Kwame Kilpatrick and Monica Conyers were clients of mine. But when you play the game of politics, you better know where you are all the time.
We're really excited to have his perspective here tonight. All right, Eric Welsby is the founder and principal consultant at Welsby Consulting. He works with state and local candidates, PACs, political initiatives, unions, and nonprofits to achieve their electoral, legislative, political, and communications goals. He specializes in Michigan campaign finance compliance. This is fantastic that he's here, and reporting. During the 2016 and 2018 election cycles, he worked as part of a super PAC, one of the 2,000 that we know are registered, where his duties included tracking staff hours as in-kind contributions to the PAC. In addition to his various consulting experiences, Eric taught a political science and philosophy course for nearly a decade at Saginaw Valley State University. And then finally, Tony Manning is the managing director and principal at Strategic Precision Consulting Services, a specialized public relations, crisis management, entertainment, and legal consulting firm in southeastern Michigan. Tony has worked as an advisor to members of the Michigan Legislature and the United States Congress on matters involving public policy and criminal justice reform. He attended Concordia University, the Ann Arbor campus, where he majored in public policy and legal studies. He says that his daily mission is to help serve the needs of an ever-changing socioeconomic community. And maybe most excitingly, he is the proud father of a beautiful girl, I saw the photos, who is 35 days old today.
34.
Wow.
So gentlemen, I read your bios. It would be great if at this moment, if you want to just say a few more things about your experience, and especially as it might relate to this subject before we get into a conversation.
In a nutshell, the one thing we have to understand, consistent with those that drafted the United States Constitution, is that money is not free speech. Corporations are not people. When the United States Constitution was drafted, when we talked about free speech, no one ever envisioned money being free speech or corporations being treated like people. And that's very, very important to understand in this age of Trump, whose legacy is stacking the federal bench so that the rich can get rulings like they did 10 years ago. And we're going to be paying for that for a couple of generations to come, but I'll get into it in a bit.
You can probably hear me. I'm used to being a faculty member as well, so I'm used to talking loudly
Can I ask
in
you,
a room.
because there may be people with hearing impairments that they do not choose to disclose, and it's better for them to
You're right.
have it through, so
Good.
just so we don't have to force people to disclose things.
No, you're great. Thank you for pointing that out. I got into campaign finance by accident. I was doing a lot of political work and a lot of friends and candidates. No one wants to deal with this part of elections. So I made the mistake of volunteering once, and now it's most of what I do. And you know, it's you know, as you pointed out, there's some really important aspects to it, but there's a lot of questionable things that go on, and we'll probably talk about it, but there's a lot of the reporting requirements that are out there, and some of the improvements that the legislature, particularly the state level, has made to make reporting more transparent, in my opinion, as someone that does it, has made it less transparent. It's required less reporting, less often, you know, but they passed these bills to applause of transparency. You know, a lot of our local candidates can basically go from January 1st of this year until, if they don't have a primary, until the 20th, before the 20th of August, September, October, yeah, the 20th of October, before they have to report. So you can have most of a year where local candidates don't have to tell you where their money's coming from. And by the time you find out, it's election day. So, you know, these are changes that have been made in the state, in addition to, and some of it in an effort to comply with Citizens United. They've taken an approach of, if it's good enough for the federal government, it's good enough for the state. So we've actually weakened our rules at the state and local level to comply with the weak federal standards.
It is working, I think. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks to Fiotis and Anna, who did a great job at organizing this. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm gonna take yours.
Okay, we're going to try this again. Okay, so thanks you guys for having us here, and it's a pleasure being on the panel with Sam and Eric. And I'll just say this: elections have consequences. Elections have consequences. Sam just touched on it, that we're going to be paying for this in our judiciary for years and years to come. And it's sad that we only start talking about dark money, because it's been around before Citizens United, before this decision, it was around. And we're just now starting to talk about and see how important it is because, well, of our current occupant of the White House and other areas of the legislature. So I'm just looking forward to a great conversation. I'm not going to bore you guys with a bunch of philosophical details, and I'll just let our conversation do its work. So, thanks.
All right, well, I think it might be useful, maybe to pick up right where what you offered to us, Sam, this money is not free speech. So do you want to expand on what you mean by that?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. First of all, the top 1% has stacked the federal bench right now. All that the U.S. Senate has been doing since Donald Trump has been in office is appointing federal judges who are diametrically opposed to the very existence, politically anyway, and in other ways, of the bottom 99%. They are there, these appointees, to literally trample upon the freedoms of the 99%. When you say that dollars and the expenditure of dollars is free speech, when you say that corporations should be treated like people, it opens the door for folks who can move freely. I mean, you know, the version of Trump in the Democratic Party is what's his name, Bloomberg, from New York, the former mayor of New York, who is now buying human beings in Detroit, a lot of black folks, political beings like they're on a political slave auction block. And they do it willingly now. They take the money, but money right now is determining the destiny of this country to the detriment of the majority of the American people. And they say, well, we got the ruling, we've got that court case from 10 years ago. But what we may need to do, two things. One, we need to abolish the FEC. It's virtually worthless. It's not a law enforcement agency at all. And that's what it needs to be, to rein in these profiteers that do not have the interests of the majority of the American people at heart. The U.S. Constitution was not drafted to defend and advance the rights of things. A corporation is a thing. A corporation is not a human being, not a person. Dollars are not free speech, yet that's how folks are operating right now. And we need an FEC or a version of it that operate. I think it was McCain and Feingold, the late Senator John McCain and Feingold, that had put forth an organization that would have had real teeth, a real law enforcement agency. That's what the FEC was supposed to be. But everyone with a wink and a smile does what they want to, and it is the wild, wild west in terms of financing elections. Today in this nation, and the American people, I just believe, deserve just a whole lot more than they're getting.
I'm going to table this question of representation of things, and I want to get back to the question of is money speech? But after, I think, I might ask Eric to say a little bit more about the FEC and reporting, because you brought this up. So what is it? Let's think about what Sam just put out, that the FEC is toothless. And then you were just describing, in some senses, how insufficient FEC reporting rules are, and then take it down to the state level and it can get even weaker. So can you describe that in a little bit more detail?
I can describe some of it. I don't deal a whole lot with FEC because I deal mostly with state and local, and recognizing that there are these different levels. The president, senators, members of Congress, all their money, all the federal PACs, all that goes through and is reported to the Federal Election Commission, to the FEC, where they have a board that's supposed to be made up of half Republicans and half Democrats. If you're not one of those two, you just don't get a voice on it. But they've made sure to basically keep it understaffed, particularly in the current administration, where they have to have a quorum to make decisions. They've been short members, and the president refuses to appoint additional members. So they're legally unable to make decisions. So if you bring a complaint to the FEC, even if they want to make a decision, they cannot legally do it right now. And haven't been able to for 2-3 years now, I think, at this point. I forget when we lost that other member. And actually, I think the last one we left because they resigned, because they were like, what am I doing here? Why am I here if we can't enforce the law? The other issue you have is with it being basically split down the middle, is you could get agreement as long as it was an issue that didn't affect one party or the other. Right? Because whichever party was gonna be hurt by it, well, those members wouldn't vote to enforce those laws. So it's set up to be a broken system. It was one of those where the concept behind it was a good idea, right? Where we all believe in good government, we'll all get together and we'll decide on fair and we'll enforce the rules fairly. But the reality of what we've seen, has made Sam's point that, why are you here? Well, why do you exist? Why are we spending money on something that's really just so we can say it exists? So, I guess I'll leave it there for the moment.
I'm gonna try it. Okay, we're gonna try this again. So I think when the statute was made for the FEC, it didn't have any teeth to it, as Sam said, and as Eric has alluded to. When you have no law enforcement authority for any administrative agency, you can do nothing. It's almost like we may as well have the FDA running the FEC because they're equivalent. And by President Trump, it was actually, Eric, after the first year of Donald Trump getting in office, that member resigned because they're like, what are we doing here? But I want to go back to something that Sam said, just briefly touch on it, and that is about the super PACs and the dark money and giving out money. One of the things that there was just an investigation on is President Trump and, a super PAC that was affiliated with President Trump giving out money to African Americans at Christmas time in the churches specifically, which is also a 501c organization. And they were just saying, hey, we want you to vote and make America great again, and we're going to give out prizes of $200. And yet we don't see the problem with that. We don't see that that's buying an election. We say, oh, it's a super PAC and they're giving back to the community and they're giving out Christmas turkeys. I don't know how many of you guys have seen the movie New Jack City, but it's almost like Nino Brown giving out turkeys to the community. I mean, I'm dealing drugs and I'm a drug kingpin, but yet I'm giving out turkeys, so that makes everything better. I think until we come together collectively as a community and as people in general, because we can sit here and lecture you guys about, says this decision, you guys can say, that was a great speech. We can sit here and say, you need to go out and vote, no, that's great, but again, it goes back to the old adage, elections have consequences, and until we change the legislative, and I'm an independent, let me be clear, I'll vote Republican or Democrat, I just want the right person in office. But you have to have people, if you're gonna have an organization like the FEC, it has to have enforcement power. And as Sam said, they're useless. I mean, it's nice to have a nice cushy job saying, I'm with the FEC, but if you take a complaint there, it goes there to die. It's almost like Mitch McConnell's Senate. If you have a complaint or you have a good bill, if he doesn't agree with it, it goes there to die. And so we have to really do something more sharp about that.
And also to point out something, I mean, I didn't really get into it that much, but we need public financing of elections to ensure the broadest participation of the greatest number of people. If you don't have any money, it's very difficult getting elected. Now, the woman back there at the table, former state representative Mary Waters, first black woman in the history of the Michigan legislature to serve as minority floor leader. Matter of fact, she was Gretchen Whitman's floor leader, and they served 3 terms together in the Michigan House of Representatives. But she proved that in Detroit, without endorsements or anything, you can get elected. But that's a notable exception. Willie Burton proved that when he got elected to the police commission without corporate support. Others did have corporate support and well-financed backing of like Mayor Duggan and others. Willie didn't have that. Maybe that's why they arrested him during a meeting. But you get a police commission elected during a meeting, that's real special. But the point I'm making is that without public financing of these elections, the voice of the people is going to be silenced more and more and more. I mean, and the Bloombergs, see, you've heard this saying, it is cliche-ish, but there's no such thing as a right wing and a left wing. It's the same damn bird. Money. Money. You take a guy that gave the keynote address for the Republicans in 2004, Mr. Stop and Frisk, and he moves with ease like Trump did, from being a Democrat to a Republican, and Bloomberg moved with ease. But the thing that moves with ease are the dollars, unimaginable dollars. Today, Mike Bloomberg could spend $100 million a day between now and election day in November, And he would still have, I think, 30 billion is the article I read, 30 billion left, which would still make him one of the 30 richest people in the nation. I mean, just that, it's dollars that are determining our political destiny, and this nation has too many human beings to be subservient to those that have the dollars.
So let's talk about getting the mic to go back on.
Let's talk about public financing. And here's the question. We've talked about expenditures directly by campaigns or coordinated with a campaign. And then there's this parallel universe of money that's paid for commercials and other kinds of advertising that isn't governed by that or isn't coordinated with that campaign. So given that, should we think of, and I'm turning to you guys, should we think of public financing as being something that could fix all of our concerns about money, or would its effect be to set at least a floor, like a minimum amount of money that's spent, but could it do anything about the ceiling? Could it do anything about the dark money and the super PAC money?
Well, I think we have to start somewhere. For every problem, there's a solution. You just have to work through several solutions before you get to the actual real solution. Public finance is not the end-all, be-all, but it's going to at least get you a little bit more there. And you know, as Sam said about the potential president candidate, Mayor Bloomberg, it's interesting because all that money he's spending, Sam, remember, is also a tax write-off. So it's actually, he's going to be able to write off a lot of that on his tax as a loss.
He's not writing off any campaign dollars.
I mean,
He can't
somehow. Well,
he's just spending it because he's got it.
Well, no, and that's my point.
He's not writing it off. I don't know what tax code you look at. Yeah.
And when I say write off, I don't mean literally write off, Sam. What I'm saying is, with billionaires, they find a way to make the money go away. It's like any business you run. If you spend money on a for-profit corporation, and again, the tax code is not, our tax code is so outdated, it's ways around everything. That's why Eric's laughing at what I'm saying. He may not literally write it off and say, oh, I spent $1 billion in this election, but there's going to be a way for him to work around that. My only point is saying this, based on your question, yes, it's going to somewhat bring up the playing field and make it a little bit easier for people to get involved, but it's not going to at any rate level it in any way, shape, or form, because again, like you just said, that high ceiling, the ceiling's high, the burden's high to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have a public financing system, right? Anyone here run for governor, and there's a public financing system. When was the last governor that took it? Right? Why don't they take it? Because they can raise way more than becomes available.
Yeah.
Right? So a public financing system only works if it's mandatory. You have to be in it and you can't go around it.
That's right.
And the problem is with Citizens United, you can't actually make a rule where you can't go around it because the courts have said, I can't stop you from spending money in an election as long as you don't coordinate it with that candidate.
And see, therein lies the rub, because the law now clearly, in terms of how the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled, is in favor of the top 1% and those that endowed with unimaginable wealth. That's why, and this is another one that'd be hard as heck to do, you need to pass a constitutional amendment that makes it clear that dollars are not free speech, the corporations are not people. Because right now, all the law in this country is stacked against the 99% majority of the citizens in this nation. And believe me, anyone that watched what happened to the ERA in terms of getting a constitutional amendment through, I mean, you won't see it in our lifetime on anything, like, at least not in mine, in terms of anything like that. But we're only limited by our imagination and what's right. And at some point in time, the people are going to look at what's really happening, and the light bulb is going to turn on, and folks are going to say, I have no say in how this nation is being run. Only people with money decide how the nation is being run, and that runs counter to what the framers of the Constitution intended.
So, turn it off.
So let's get back to what the outcome of all this money is. That is, what difference it makes. Okay, so this is a question for all three of you. Let's imagine a world where we didn't have money in politics. Let's imagine we had this public financing system, okay, so you could get your ads out or whatever, but it's mandatory participation, and, stay with me, let's imagine a world where there wasn't this outside spending. That's the problematic part, right? But let's imagine that that didn't happen, and so we could have this public financing system that was complete. So for each of you, what difference do you think that would make? That is, what are you seeing about the system now and the effect of money that you think would change if that were gone?
Ooh, it's working. All right. I guess my number one hope would that with less money, we'd have shorter campaigns, that we wouldn't have to start the presidential race the day, and while we're still counting the votes. That's is always my most appalling thing is polls close, and within 30 minutes of that, turn on any network. Well, who do you think is going to run in 4 years? Can we at least figure out how this one went before we start speculating? With less money, you can't afford to run a 4-year campaign. Right? You can only run however much you can make that money last. I hope that would also help bring down some of the cost because, some of the reasons some of the media side of it is so expensive is because they have all these campaigns and these outside groups will spend the money. And I'll outspend my opponent in order to get that. So they keep jacking up the prices in order to make that extra draw. I don't like from their perspective, it's a good business plan. It's a great way to make a lot of money, but it's not real good for democracy. So if we could have shorter campaigns and maybe and at the same time get some of the costs down, I think that would help because we're going to have less of the garbage and hopefully more actual useful content versus just filling up the airwaves with just noise for 4 years.
Yeah. And the heavy statement you made is what is good for democracy. With all the noise that's out here, we lose sight of the reality that we're supposed to be living in a democracy. And now we have to discuss, is democracy cost effective? We have to do a cost-benefit analysis on democracy. And when we do, we might examine why we have an FCC, for example. And when we do a campaign, the interests of democracy demand that each candidate running should have an opportunity to be heard by the broadest base of people possible. But as Eric just pointed out, unless you have the dollars and the deep pockets, you won't be heard because you don't have the money for the airtime. You can't compete with a Bloomberg. But what if there was a ceiling put on how much networks could charge during a presidential debate, for example, or any other campaign, that the FCC would have to provide an opportunity for candidates to define themselves? It will break the heart of the TV stations. It'll break the heart of folks that get the commissions, purchasing the airtime. But is profits the end, or is democracy the end? If we are going with democracy, and heaven forbid, we may have to make profits secondary. Right now, profits drive the whole piece, the dollar.
How do I follow up with that? I mean, I'll say this.
You have to take notes on that.
I'm trying.
Okay.
My BlackBerry's in the car, my iPhone's in the case, but I'm trying. But in all seriousness, it's funny you bring up the TV because it's like, what commercial comes after? So for example, you have all these Bloomberg commercials and Trump commercials. The marketing time that they're selling, what comes after that? So for example, let's say that Trump buys this big ad for a campaign. What the TV, the commercial, what the people, the advertisers are able to say, hey, do you want to go after Trump? This many people watches a Trump commercial, so you want to go after, you want to go before, because again, it goes back to profits, dollars, and cents. I think if it was a level playing field, the world that you're talking about would be the same world that Donald Trump shows his tax returns. I really don't see us getting to that level, but I think they would at least allow people to run who want to run on the one thing that, same thing Barack Obama ran on, which was hope. I think that if you get people who are able to give just a plain view of what they're running on, hey, I just want to make a difference in the community. If I decided to run for office, I would never do that. But if I did decide to do that, one of the reasons I wouldn't decide to do that is because of money. Because I know that even if I have a great message, I have some great things I want to do in the community, and they could really make a difference, I know it would never come across because I don't have the proper money. And so how do we do that? If we do lower it to that level, then what's the enforcement mechanism? As Sam said, the FCC, how do we enforce? That's the key thing, enforcement mechanisms. We can have all the organizations we want, we can have all the rules and regulations we want, but if there is no enforcement mechanism to those rules and to those administrative agencies, then we're right back where we are right now. We may as well stay here.
And if I can add real quick, one other thing is, you look at how many negative ads we see, whether that's TV ads, radio ads, or negative flyers. Who's paying for those? Who are those coming from? You look, it's the outside groups. When you can reduce the outside groups, you can actually reduce the negative. I mean, there'll still be some negative, but even like when you watch the ads in this coming year, right? When they come from a candidate campaign, right, where they have to be on there and say, my name is Eric Welsby and I approve this message, you'll know they're about to hit their opponent if the ad starts with that. It starts with that, they give you the negative, hoping you forgot who paid for the ad by the end. If they're saying positive stuff, they say the positive stuff, and then they end with their bright smiley face saying they approved it. But then you have all these ads that aren't tied to candidates. Have you seen any of those say anything positive about anybody? Right? And they say things way nastier than what you'll ever see a candidate campaign say. Why? Because no one's held responsible. Right? It's the Committee for a Better America.
Right. Don't know where the money's coming
coming
from.
Right?
Don't know where the money's coming from.
Yeah.
You have to have good hearing too, Eric, because they read it. That's what you hear. I'm like, who was that by? And I can't read the fast enough because it's so tiny. You don't know what committee it came from. So I just wanted to say it's like you read really fast.
Yeah.
All right, I have one last question, then we're opening it up, and it's really, in some sense, is a restatement of the question I just asked, but I'm going to ask it more directly. Where have you seen money shape political outcomes? Does it, and shape it, I'm assuming, for the worse, since this is a panel that clearly is not a fan of money. So where has money moved the process away from the democratic ideal?
Every campaign there is. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, dollars control who gets in the office, who doesn't. Now, there are exceptions. I mean, in a city like Detroit, if you're capable of building a strong grassroots movement, for example, there's a woman, Joanna Underwood, she was just elected to the Detroit City Charter Commission. She didn't have any of the money, corporate money that Duggan and some of his folks had, because the incumbents, those already in office, they want to preserve the status quo. They want predictability about what the next Detroit City Charter looks like. So they poured money into a slate of what we refer to as corporate status quo candidates. Most of those people won to the point where they got a majority on the city charter. I mention it because it's local. The city charter commission. Joanna Underwood hit the streets. Very Ebonic speech, no Yale accent, no money, had a generic piece of literature, but because of the majority Detroit, and she knocked on the doors that folks are afraid to go to those houses that control the money in Detroit, and she won. Second highest vote getter, over 60,000 votes. But for the most part, money rules in a campaign. I mean, I've spent considerable sums of money for clients, I know that. And I always enjoyed spending the money for them. I'm not anti-money, I just know how it rolls.
Yeah, you know, and I think it's interesting, you know, when you talk about these races where people didn't have money and they did the ground game, they ran the ground plan, and they did it well. That's great, that's what it should be. The problem is the people that like all this money spending then use those cans to say, look, money isn't doing it. This person won, they didn't have any money. See, the system works.
And it doesn't.
When the reality is, you're talking about 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000
Exactly.
candidates is able to win that way, right? And honestly, finding candidates that are willing to work that hard is sometimes hard in its own right. But, you know, it gets turned around on itself that, see, this person won without money, so the system works just fine, right? We've got our couple token candidates that worked hard, won, you know, maybe they just have to be a unique person who's super involved in their community, and that's where that support came from. Okay? But the other aspect of money that I think is concerning is, you know, there's this misconception that people or organizations give money to candidates to get them to go a certain way. When the reality is, these organizations, they find out who's already with them and give them money to help them. The disconnect is they find people who might not be in a district that agrees with them, and they pump money in to help that person win a district that does not agree with them, right? But and I do a lot of work in labor politics. So I do a lot of work with the Democrats and pro-labor candidates. You know, we don't get calls from the Chamber of Commerce to give us money. We just don't.
No.
Right? Candidates that are pro-labor, we don't have to go find unions, they find us, right? And it's the same on the other side, people that don't like unions and, you know, like business interests, right? The Chamber of Commerce finds people that already agree with it. I've never seen the Chamber or unions give a big, maybe a couple dollars, but not significant amounts to someone to change their mind. They find those who are already with them and support them. But, you know, when they're going in to places where the population is saying, I don't like this, I don't agree with this, but that person is getting enough money to then influence enough voters to just get over the line.
Yeah. And being solution-based, New York City, for example, was it Politico? I just read this in. Anyway, if you give $50, it turns into $350 to turn to the candidates. There's also some recommendations for a voucher system where each citizen would be afforded a voucher that they could donate to the candidate of their choice. But we have to begin a trend towards some measure of public financing. And one of the ways we can do that is when Amazon pays $0 in taxes. If we had a tax the rich system, we could channel some of those dollars into ensuring that we increase the odds that democracy indeed takes place. Now, one of the best people running for president right now, I'm not working with him or anything, but who really goes into this hard and heavy is Bernie Sanders. And when you hear him get into, and everybody's lifted from his program and platform, when you hear Bernie talk about this issue of campaign financing, you could watch Bloomberg, and they know it's his own money, but you'll watch most candidates crawl under a rug. They don't want to hear it, not even in the Democratic Party.
I'll say one thing really quick. I like money. I used to like money, then I had a daughter and she spends it all now, so I don't like money anymore. But again, it goes, I can't really emphasize more than what Eric and Sam said. Again, until we figure out a way. So for example, Commissioner Berg and I were talking as we were getting those delicious tacos earlier. Oh yeah, shout out to the cooks, you guys did a good job. But we were talking about money, I was talking about felons and things that I'm doing to work with the felon population. That's a population no one talks about. No one talks about the money, resources, things that go into that. But you know, 1 in every 4.2 people in the state of Michigan have a felony on their record. If you imagine, we're talking about super PACs, if you just imagine you decided one day, you know what, I want to start a super PAC for just felons. Because no one targets these people, but they can vote in Michigan, okay? Imagine the shift in the electoral atmosphere that you could have. Now that's for a positive purpose, but I'm just saying that that's a set of people that you could get to start a super PAC or something and say, hey, I want to start this up, and use that money to whatever advantages. Anyone can start a super PAC if you get enough people and say, hey, we want to start a PAC and do this, but will you is the question, or does anybody want to talk about it?
Yeah, in speeches I give, what a line I use is I say, you know, there are more graduates from the University of Prisons in Detroit than Michigan State and the University of Michigan combined. More alumni from the University of Prisons in the city of Detroit than Michigan State and the University of Michigan combined.
Sam,
I mean,
how many-
that's a reality.
How many?
And they would be big as a labor union, what you're talking about. And they'd be viable once it was clear that they were throwing their votes. You could do it with different candidates. Zach Pack supported this candidate, that candidate won, and the difference were graduates from the University of Prisons.
And I said to say this, our prison system is like a super PAC in a sense, because we spend more on prisons than higher education and private education combined twice in the state of Michigan. So we don't discuss things like that, but if we go back to the root of the whole issue of not informing people of what it's about, not informing people about the decision, not informing people about democracy, what is democracy when you break it down, as Sam said earlier, I mean really, if we're looking for the common good, do we even know what the common good is anymore? We're so on Instagram and Facebook, and we're so saturated with message after message after message because of dark money, because of not just dark money, hell, light money too.
Well, and when we couple these issues, the finance issue, with things like misinformation about felons being able to vote. I did some work with Saginaw City Councilwoman Brenda Moore, who works with that community in Saginaw quite a bit. And, you know, you have this population that repeatedly gets disenfranchised in having their voice heard in multiple ways. And then when we come to the door and say, no, you can vote, I'm sorry, they don't believe me. Right? I need someone they know, like Brenda Moore, who will say, no, and here's the documentation, so we pulled together some document to help. But, you know, if you couple in people that don't have money and then people that are disenfranchised and they turn on the news, and because in some states felons can't vote, when the news talks about it, they say felons can't vote. And everybody in Michigan then believes that's true.
And that's a form of voter
wants to go back to
suppression. That's
jail.
a form, misinformation can be a form of voter suppression.
And no one wants to go back to jail for registering to vote. No one wants to risk it. Like, so if they think they might get in trouble, they just as soon not participate. And that's a problem, particularly for our cities.
This is a huge, huge problem, and this is, strangely enough, something that money might help fix, because you can use the money to get the correct information out, to overcome the misinformation, disinformation campaigns that have suppressed the vote. I would love to hear from all of you. So if you have a question, I'll come find you and give you the mic, assuming we won't get feedback.
Hello, good evening. I would like all the members of the panel to address this issue. If there is any relationship between all this money that's coming into the super PACs and 501Cs from out of state? Aren't there some issues with interstate commerce rules? I would like to know if that is a way to address this issue. Because I'm thinking of states where you have, let's say Montana, which I think is where the Citizens United originated. That's a very small state, and all these people came from the outside to get that accomplished. And I was just wondering about interstate commerce.
Ms. England, it was a pleasure meeting you earlier and talking with you briefly, and thank you for that question. I don't believe, and again, I have two guys who are probably more astute at this than I am, but as long as you don't donate more than the maximum, there's nothing on the books that I know of saying you can't donate to a candidate in another state, provided you meet the, quote, FEC rules and regulations for the maximum campaign contributions for the federal government and the rules of that state. But there are no statutes that would interfere with your right to, you know, freedom of speech, even though speech is not money, in a sense that you have the right to support candidates or express yourself as you choose to. So I don't know of any, I'm a law major, and I don't know any law, no laws on the books that I know of. Again, doesn't mean I know everything, but I don't know of any.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It comes back to the court said money is speech. And whether we agree with it or not, that's what they've decided. And therefore, restricting my ability to spend money in my community or the next community over or the next state over or 12 states over, that's all would fall under an inappropriate restriction of the freedom of speech. Now, the other side of it was mentioned very briefly in the beginning explanation is with these 501s that can take money from anybody and not report it. We don't know if they are getting contributions that would be like if a candidate I'm working for got a donation from someone who was not a U.S. citizen, there would be problems. There would be problems. We need to return that and make sure we report that we got it and that we returned it and prove all that. Otherwise, there's problems. These 501s can take money from anybody, and since they don't have to report it, we don't know who it's coming from. If it's coming from individuals who, just happen to like an issue, or if it's coming from foreign governments to influence it. And we'll never know because they don't have to tell anybody who gives them money.
There is no law enforcement agency, and I'm including the FEC, that can move fast enough. By the time you blink, the election is over, the money's been spent, and a guy or a woman has won. They might not deserve to win, but they had the money to win. It comes in, they spend it, they make the media buy. You blink, the election's over, money spent. And there's no real law, I'm using this term intentionally, law enforcement agency, which is what the FEC should have been, that can move on it.
I mean, and if you look at Congress's response to, Facebook ads and things like that, by the time they brought in Zuckerberg and talked with him, the election wasn't only done, the president was inaugurated in office for a couple months. How is that a solution? You weren't going to undo the election. Right? Once the results are certified,
It's over.
there's nothing short of the next election or impeachment, and we've seen how one of those went. So by the time they get to it, it's too late. We voted.
And Eric, what you just said, it's one of those, oops, we're sorry. So Zuckerberg and all these people go up, get hauled up before Congress, and they get chastised on national TV. And they're like, behind the scenes, there's the wink and the nod before you go, now listen, we're going to be hard on you, okay? Just understand we got to do this for the American people. But then when they walk out, it's like, okay, we're going to charge you guys a $5 million fine for doing this. And they're like, oh, we're sorry, okay. We'll pay the fine right off on our taxes.
And the result is, as someone who's been going through the process to run ads on social media, is I go through, there's additional things I have to prove I'm me and I can legally, buy ads. But all you do is find one person like me that can do that, and then you can ship money in from anywhere and do it, right? The person buying the ad has to be verified as someone who could legally do it, but Facebook has no way to verify where my money's coming from.
Yeah, the big issue is in this parallel spending. I've done a little bit of work looking, we talked a little bit, Eric raised it, on different states have different laws for state and local offices. And the campaign finance laws comparing across the states is really fascinating because it's hugely variant from one state to another. And Alaska has a law that says that a candidate may not receive, I think this is a candidate for governor, may not receive more than $20,000 total from outside of the state. So that's a different kind of limitation, rather than a limitation on me as a potential donor, how much I can give. That's a limitation on how much the candidate can receive. But, those dollar amounts are so tiny compared to what they're talking about with the actions of the super PACs and the 501Cs that can just spend unlimited amounts to get their message out and support a candidate or go against one. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I wanted to make a comment, but I'm kind of torn. I agree with the general concept of money not being speech and corporations aren't people. But at the same time, I saw a meme recently that kind of touched me. It was like, you don't have to live in Kentucky to beat Mitch McConnell. And you can do that by making donations to his competition and donate money to support it. So I kind of understand the bigger picture of it, but I am frustrated. I also read an article that said that Citizens United led directly to Trump's impeachment, because if it weren't for Lev Partners donate $350,000 to a super PAC, he would have never gotten all the access that he got to the Trump world and wouldn't have gained the influence that he had. So it does lead to corruption, because we know they are coordinating behind the scenes and through back channels and things of that nature, and they can't stop them. So that's the scary part.
I mean, I'll say one thing about that comment, in that, yes, he got impeached, but ultimately, because of all the dark money that was spent, he wasn't convicted. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You're right, you bring up the impeachment. You know, he was impeached, and that was great. But, I mean, if anyone else, any other politician, I'm just going to say Sam, if Sam were the president, okay, and he did half of the stuff, no, a quarter of the stuff that the president did, with or without citizens. Matter of fact, we're going to say President Obama, okay? Any of the stuff they did in 2008, if President Obama would have pulled that, it wouldn't have had to be a Citizens United decision for that. I mean, he would have been convicted. So, but I get where you're coming from. But yeah, I mean, I'm not anti-money. There are some times where money is needed, and there are times where you want to support other candidates. I'm not saying restrict all money against all, going into other states. I'm simply saying that there has to be not even a level playing field, but there at least has to appear to be a level playing field. At this point, despite the FEC, it doesn't even appear to be a level playing field.
And that distinction between, you don't like what this elected official's doing, support their opponent, right? Give to their opponent's campaign is a different ask than give to a super PAC or give to this charity that's going to do voter education, right? There's those three different levels. I think most people have a certain level of comfort with the supporting the candidate or the opponent directly, and that's going to get disclosed, and everyone's going to know. It's still not perfect, because it's still a game where, even with limits, you got to have at least $1 you're capable of giving to play in that game. But when you compare that to then what the PACs, super PACs, and charities are doing, it's okay to have a varying level of discomfort. I know, as someone that works in that, I have my own varying level of discomfort as we get further away from me telling people who's giving this money. I'm fortunate, I don't work for anybody where I don't get to tell who's giving me money, so I can sleep with a clean conscience and say, if you want to know who supports the people I work for, it's all on government websites. We can't keep it secret. So, but there are people that go to sleep every night, and the only reason they sleep well is because you don't know who's giving them money.
Yeah. And if you get nothing else from this, just understand something. When money is speech, when corporations are people, real human beings are left out of the democracy equation. Your voice is being choked. You're being gagged. When they talk about free speech, what they're really saying is, in pure English, the dollar is more valuable than the human beings. The corporations are more valuable than the human beings. And that flies in the face of what democracy was supposed to be under the Constitution. But when you got the 1% making the court rulings, they make the rulings in favor of what? The 1%, to the detriment of the majority, the overwhelming majority. And where we are right now, our voices are being shut out. Our right to free speech is being eradicated by dollars and corporations. That's all.
Yeah, that's it. We have a question. Let me see.
We have a question right here.
Thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation, but I'm seeking clarification for something you said, Sam, and a clarification on something I've heard from all the panelists. You talked about the U.S. Constitution and framers. I would say that the Constitution and the original framers intended the 1%, the white male property owners. So we're almost going backwards. It's just that we had experience with some group politics through labor unions and some other things in
Yeah, I get that, and the 3/5 thing, all
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
I get all that. But the point I'm making is that when the Supreme Court says that money, dollars are free speech, and they treat corporations as people, I'm saying that's down there.
Yeah,
That's just going down the wrong path, and that ensures that the majority, the overwhelming majority of America will be held hostage to those that have the deep pockets and the money. And I just find that to be fundamentally contrary to what democracy is supposed to be about.
I agree, but my other clarification is, my experience, I've worked or consulted for 501c3s. I've been part of 2 PACs, and I've been part of an educational campaign on a ballot initiative, the regional transit campaign, and we flipped to C4 like September 1st, sometime after the primary. And I have to say the record keeping was not fun. Even with our PAC that was formed during the Coleman Young administration, because we knew there'd be a time that he would not be in office. And we were sort of like the Young Turks, both Republicans, Democrats, and Independents who wanted to influence the next generation post Coleman Young's tenure. And it was a lot, and this was pre a lot of the campaign finance laws. The 2016 campaign, we also formed a PAC, the nonprofit I work for, to support the smart millage. Because the person, John Moak, who had been doing it, he was busy with the Kilpatrick campaign. We said, well, we don't want that money to be wasted or not be donated. We sat around, got an attorney, formed a PAC. But again, if you're trying to follow the rules, it's really hard. I had to keep 2 time records, we had 2 cabinets, we did 2 of everything, 2 phone lines, we separated everything, and we still got cited.
Well, and I can tell you, since that's the primary thing I do through my consulting is on campaign finance and reporting, there's having been through it, anyone that hasn't, I don't recommend it. Just it's awful. Because there's a lot of records to keep, and but also once you do it, you see all the places where if you're not scrupulous, you could do some shady stuff. Right? It's not that hard because most of it's kind of on the honor system unless they come and go through your books. Short of that, it's basically on the honor system. So if you're not an honest person, there are so many holes that you can go through. I mean, and that's in working for the super PAC. I get really with my work with the AFL-CIO, I get released to partially released to our super PAC, which is Working America. But because I have this dual role, we've always kept good records, but particularly once the current administration came in, we got a lot stricter on it because their worry was someone going through our books finding one error and using it to bankrupt labor. But reporting everything from not just the straight up dollars, but how many hours today did I spend doing work for the AFL-CIO and our labor councils? And how many hours did I spend working on campaign things for the super PAC so that they could then, in their reporting, put, this is how many hours, whatever my hourly wage is, as an in-kind contribution to this PAC, right? But again, this is with a super PAC that does have to do some reporting, though way less than candidates and regular PACs. And that's still more reporting than you get on, and also we should, there are a lot of 501c3s and C4s that don't touch politics, they just do education, they just do charity work, and they are great organizations. But there's a bunch of groups out there trying to ruin their names by using the good reputation of these organizations to play in politics and do some awful things.
As a matter of fact, I adhere to those that are making recommendations to simply end super PACs, to end 501c4s that don't have to report their donors. If you don't have to report your donors, you shouldn't exist. That's just my position on that, because you're conscientious. The folks that don't report their donors, that are handling big bucks, they're violating every rule, coming in spending the money, and gone. I mean, and if you don't have to report donors, you shouldn't be allowed to participate. I'm talking about the super PACs that don't have to report their donors as well, but you would have to have legislation for that. There would have to be specific legislation for that, to end the super PAC, to end the 501c4s that don't have to report the donors. And there's a slew of them out there.
I'll just say one thing to your comment really quick, and that's as far as the Constitution goes, because I love the Constitution. I don't remember, and Sam and Eric, maybe you guys can remember, I don't remember corporations being in the beginning of the Constitution, or a Constitution formed by the people. And so,
It wasn't we the corporations?
no, I mean, I know. I
Learned
something. I know. But you know,
We the corporation.
we the people, and so that's you know, that, I mean, that's the basics of it. It goes back to the root of it, no matter whether it's who made the Constitution, it was we the people. And now that corporations have gotten so involved, it's no longer a government of we the people, it's we the corporation. The one thing I wanted to, John, you just nailed it on the head. Not all 501c4s and 501c3s are evil. But going back to what Sam said, if you don't have to report, if there's no accountability, if you can just, if there's, what's the saying, chickens around the hen house, if there's no one, you know, to see what you're doing, there's going to be no transparency. Even if you're saying, oh, in the name of transparency, we're doing this, this, and this, there really is no transparency. So, but thank you for that question.
No, I agree about we the people, but I'm just saying the reality is money has always.
Absolutely.
This isn't a new thing. It's just they're taking it further than you could ever have imagined.
And it's a case where we made some progress, and in one court decision, they basically wiped any progress we had made out.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, it was, one day we were like, look, things were bad. They're not great now, but they're at least this much better. And then you had the Supreme Court say, nope, never mind. Forget all that progress. We're just going to go back. Whoever's got money gets to play. Everyone else figure it out.
Yeah, we're still experiencing. We have time for one final question, and this gentleman has a question.
No, not him.
Oh, boy, it's about to get real. It's about to get real.
You're absolutely right, Sam. Talk about fantasy. Among the other fantasies is the projected one and misleading one, is that this country is or has ever been a democracy. It has never been that. It has never been intended to be that. And anyone who suggests that is misleading or misinforming the people here or the people who are not here. And you know, Sam, when you very dismissively say 3/5, well, of course. How can you have any semblance of a democracy if you have a quarter of your population who are generously given over to being called 3/5? And it is just a financial interest. And all of as the woman here indicates, it has always been money. And to suggest that money isn't free speech is an oxymoron. After all, when the Constitution was developed, who had free speech? Only those with money. And your ancestors and my ancestors had no free speech. Why? Because, of course, we had no money power, or to put with it, military power. And certainly the slaves in the next generation and the generation to now never conceived of this nation as a democracy in their interests, okay? And all of that has been just propaganda and brainwash.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, if I can finish, when you talk about access to free speech and it's limited, it is more available now than it has been to the masses at the cheapest price, and that is the internet. Before then, the impediments to quote unquote free speech was totally controlled electronically and mechanically in terms of the printing press. So that when you talk about free speech in this age, it is more than ever accessible to the poor and the downtrodden. And unless you have thesis and antithesis as opposed to just really an ahistorical synthesis that you folk have been putting out, and I hate to qualify the misinformation that the University of Michigan professor has put out, it's just kind of embarrassing. And I don't expect better from them, Sam, but I sure as hell expect better from you.
Well, let me tell you why you're analytically deficient, Professor. The reason you're analytically deficient, as one that served 4 years in the military, honorable discharge, Vietnam War era veteran, I choose to inflict myself on America. I choose to heighten the contradictions despite the historical realities. I choose to say that there should be democracy. I know what actually has occurred, but to embrace your defective analysis would result in defeatism. You're right. You're so right that you're wrong, because that type of analysis leads to inaction. We have the internet. We have more freedom now than ever. I will never be satisfied with the status quo. Period. I just choose to inflict myself on the damn universe.
Well, I was an anti-war person, and anybody who went
Well,
to
you
war...
can be anti-war. I did, man. I mean,
Anybody who
cool.
went to war for this country in terms of Vietnam was just suckered into defending America.
I'm not going to fight all that all over again. We did what we've done, whether we did time or military time. We've done it. It's part of our journey, and we just keep moving.
And some of us resist.
Resist.
We'll say him first.
Power to the people. Okay.
All right, well, Sam, thank you.
And I believe it.
Thank you for your service while we're up here, Sam. But I do want to say one thing about the internet. What we have to be mindful of is, yes, I'm a younger millennial, and Eric, you're younger, and Sam, you're just honorary younger. But the point is, the internet does not say anything. The internet does not give you everything. The internet can also be censored. The internet can also be suppressed. I mean, not that we live in China, but look at China. They can suppress, if there's certain things that they don't want online, they can suppress it. Google, Facebook, if Congress threatens Zuckerberg with enough power, they can say, hey, don't publish that story about this or that or this or that. So the internet, yes, it's accessible, but it's not, the internet doesn't give you everything either. So it's not, I mean, I kind of disagree with that point as far as the internet, because the internet is only what people make it Wikipedia. Look at all the false ads that people were able to publish during the last presidential election that helped get President Trump. And again, I'm not advocating for Republican or Democrat. I'm just stating facts based on I can't think of the name of the company, Cambridge Analytica. All the stuff that they were able to get out there, and all the information that was breached because of what they were doing. So the internet is not the end all be all. That'd be my only take on that.
And speech is about more than just putting your thoughts out there. It's also about being heard. And there's a lot of places on the internet you can put whatever you want, but no one's going to see it. I mean, there's several countries that are great examples of that. But I think, in addition, is you look at, and Facebook's easy to pick on because they keep making the most public mistakes. But you look like, okay, there's this information, so now we're going to certify fact checkers, and we'll put a little thing to say, but you look at some of the organizations that they pick to be their fact checkers, and those organizations are the ones spreading some of the bullshit. Free speech, and if someone says something not true, we'll check it and we'll let you know, but the people we are checking aren't trustworthy. You can't trust them to tell you the truth. So, it creates as much as it's allowed more people to be heard by more people and to interact with more people, it also has more people out there distracting and lying and putting distruths out there. And I'm not comfortable trusting Mark Zuckerberg with my free speech and my ability to be heard. And that's really when we lean on these companies, say the internet will be the solution. The internet is, the systems that we use are all owned by super rich people.
Yeah.
Right? You're just putting your speech
There's a freedom of speech algorithm.
It's the same as the printing press, right? A rich guy owns the printing press, rich guy owns Facebook. You're putting your stuff there. Where it actually ends up, we don't really know.
Thank you. So I think at this point, given that it's 8 o'clock, if I could invite each of you to say, if you have one last shorter thought, share it now.
Just enjoyed it. Just stay woke, stay alert, and question authority. That's an old one.
Be part of the system. You know, the only way we make change is by being a part of it. You know, we don't all have the ability to write $10,000 checks. But we can all give 2 hours to a candidate we believe in. Whether that's stuffing envelopes, making phone calls, knocking doors, right? Whatever it is you can do based on your ability. You know, I go through this with candidates all the time that, you know, oh, I don't think I can raise that much money. Well, then how many doors can you knock?
Yeah.
Because if you can knock more doors, the money becomes less of a factor. We still need some of it because we need a piece of lip to put in your hand. But we need bodies to do that. A candidate can't knock, in most cases, can't knock their whole district by themselves. We need people to make phone calls. We need people to greet people when they come in to volunteer. So find the way that works for you, for someone you can believe in, and you are making a change. You are making a difference.
I think President Obama put it best, don't boo, vote. Elections have consequences. I think we all have a responsibility to get involved. I think we all have a responsibility for the demise, to a degree, of the socioeconomic status of our varying communities, because we don't get involved in the process. People think that they can't make a difference. People think that they can't post or go pick somebody up to vote or go get somebody involved, or, you know, it's as Sam said, simply stay woke. And staying woke doesn't mean just, you know, okay, yep, I'm gonna go vote and that should be the end of it. Discuss voting, talk about voting. Have an intellectual debate. There's nothing wrong. There's gonna be things that Sam and I may not agree on, Eric and I may not agree on, but guess what? The collective conversation taking place is what allows progress. And until the conversation takes place, there's not gonna be any progress. So, and I thank you for you did an awesome job here as the moderator, so thank you for that. And that's it, thank you.
So here's what I took from this panel of amazing, very wise gentlemen. Democracy is not a gift. Democracy is a responsibility, right? This is something that we have to work for if we want to have it. And I think that you've just gotten some outstanding advice about how to pull it back and make it work for us. I hope we see that this year. I'm excited about it, and I want to just take this opportunity to thank them for this wonderful conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank our panel for their discussion. Thank the moderator for moderating a wonderful discussion. Let's give one more round of applause, please. And I want to thank you all again for taking time out of your lives and busy schedule to join us here at the University of Michigan Detroit Center for our Eye on Detroit series. Our next panel discussion is going to be, we have two Eye on Detroits, one in March and one in April. We're going to be talking about gun violence in America as a health epidemic, and then we're going to be talking about taxing vice as communities use historically illegal means to raise money now through marijuana, gambling, and other things. And we're going to talk about the social impact of those. So please come back, join us for more great discussion, and have a great evening. Thank you all.
Thank you.